Fun fact, this was actually going to be one of my first Politics and Media episodes because I had heard of the movie, never seen it, and figured, hey, making an episode about it would be a perfectly valid excuse to watch it. So I did, wrote a review of it, and it was put in the vault ready to be released at a future date. But there was one major problem. I never read the graphic novel that it was based on. I knew it existed, but I didn't read it, and instead decided to just simply do a review of the movie, and then maybe in the future I'd review the graphic novel, and then maybe do a compare and contrast later. But then I reread the script that I had, and let's just say there was one major criticism that I had that, while I still somewhat hold, ultimately didn't make sense because I was going at it as someone who never read the graphic novel. And ultimately that would hurt my analysis. So I decided for the time being I would shelve the idea and wait until I had actually read the graphic novel, then for safe measure, rewatching it so I could have the perspective of someone who hadn't read the book and had read the book, and see how that changed my perspective of it. Actually, if you want to do a proper analysis of all the versions of V for Vendetta, you need to watch Pennyworth, because it actually serves as a prequel to V for Vendetta. Wait, I thought it was a prequel to Gotham. Actually, it's a prequel to both. Ah, I see. So this video is obviously going to contain spoilers to the two only versions of this story. So if you haven't watched or read it, and are interested in that, feel free to skip this episode. First, let us go over the general plot. On the 5th of November, also known as Guy Fawkes Night, a young woman named Evie Hammond is out and is confronted by a group known as the Fingermen, the secret police of a political party called Northfire, a fascist party who rules the United Kingdom with an iron fist. The Fingermen try to use their authority to attempt to rape her when someone approaches, a masked vigilante, simply known as V, who saves her and lets her in on his plan to destroy the Northfire government in 1 year's time. Meanwhile, a police officer named Eric Finch begins to investigate this V person and starts to learn a lot about the actions his government has done, including what they have done to V, who has a vendetta on not just them, but the Northfire government as a whole. Both adaptations generally follow this plot, while specifics vary from version to version. One major contrast of the plots is that in the comic, they go into a lot of details about the Northfire government's internal struggles, with basically every other person who is the head of one of the organizations in it vying for power, while the film instead focuses on a tragic event in the past that led the Northfire government to form, a war in the former United States causing the UK to elect Northfire in a massive margin. Then a virus would be unleashed by an Islamic terrorist group that causes Northfire to assume power, much like how the Reichstag fire led the Nazis to take control. And of course, similar to the Reichstag fire, it was merely a ploy for power. Now, some of the changes can be explained away due to the changing format and streamlining the story. The first change in this regard came from the fact that in the book, it begins with V blowing up the Parliament building, succeeding where Guy Fawkes failed, whereas in the film, this serves as the climax, and instead it begins with him blowing up the Old Bailey, which he does in the book as well, but it's just a random moment in the book. And, well, this doesn't really change much, and really does kind of make sense story-wise. Make the larger action serve as the climax rather than the opener, but either way it works. The next change in this regard revolves around the character of Finch. He is a member of the Inner Circle who has some skepticism of the Northfire regime, who over the course of the story basically renounces them. In the book, he literally just dips out after V's plan succeeds. Meanwhile, in the film, Finch actually kind of helps Evie near the end, with V stating that he specifically did this because he needed Finch, presumably because he wasn't just a puppet of Northfire, seemingly mixing him up with his assistant Dominic, who plays a somewhat similar role in the book, which is weird considering in the film, Dominic is still there, but just kind of disappears during the movie. Another change in this regard was so drastic that I had no idea there was even a change. I thought it was a subtraction and an addition. During the plot of both, Evie helps V kill a pedophile priest, and afterwards she flees and meets up with a man named Gordon Dietrich. In the comic, he's just a guy who she ends up forming a relationship with. In the film, he's basically a state-sanctioned Jon Stewart, who Evie was actually trying to meet in the beginning of the film, who reveals to her that he is actually a pretty notable dissenter of the regime, owning a ton of quote-unquote subversive material, such as a satirical piece of artwork of Northfire's leader, the Quran, and gay porn, where he reveals he is in fact gay himself, and was using her as essentially a beard. Both versions have Gordon ending up getting killed. In the book, it's by a gangster, and in the film, he's blackbagged after mocking the Chancellor, being executed after finding his banned material. Honestly, again, it fits in with the more streamlined nature of a 2-hour movie. The last major story beat change comes from the climax. In the book, V is preparing for his final attack, when him and Finch confront each other and fight. V gets mortally wounded and dies in Evie's arms, who then decides to don the V persona and carry out the attack for him, all while the Chancellor makes an appearance to quell the people and is assassinated by Rosemary Almond, the wife of a former head of the Finger named Derek, who was killed very early on in the book. After 10 Downing Street is destroyed, Evie takes Dominic and says the same thing V said to her in the beginning, seemingly continuing his legacy to build a better tomorrow. The film is almond-free, so the Finger is exclusively led by Peter Creedy, who is coerced by V into killing the Chancellor in exchange for getting the chance to kill him. Creedy agrees and does the first part, the second one not so much, but V is mortally wounded and dies in Evie's arms, giving her the choice to do what is needed. She is met by Finch, who lets her fulfill the plan, and in the end, they learn that they were in fact all V. Speaking of, there is one more change between the book and the film that revolves around V, but we'll put a pin in that for later as we delve into changes that were made due to political situations. The original comic served as a critique of Margaret Thatcher and her ideology, serving as a precursor to rising authoritarianism. Meanwhile, the film was made more as a response to the Bush administration, and some smaller differences can be noted with that comparison. While the comic Northfire is very explicitly homophobic, anti-Semitic, and white supremacist, the film Northfire is more opposed to Islam. The white supremacy is more implied via English/Anglican nationalism, but the homophobia is still there. I mean, it can't be avoided considering one of V's interpretations for his vendetta comes from a lesbian woman who was imprisoned in a concentration camp alongside him, obviously recontextualizing this to be about the Bush administration, offering very similar critiques about his policies, which has actually led to a notable criticism of the film by the original writer himself, Alan Moore, who believes that the film completely missed the mark, being quoted as saying, "It seems to be, from the script that I read, sort of recasting it as current American neoconservatism versus current American liberalism. There wasn't a mention of anarchy as far as I could see. The fascism has been completely defanged." Which I shrugged off after watching the film initially, as Moore is well known for notoriously hating every single adaptation of his work. But after reading the book, then rewatching the movie, I can kind of see what he means. Now, to be fair, he's talking about a draft of the film that was not made. So there are some things that I still ultimately reject. Like, I reject the notion that V is simply a liberal battling neoconservatism. The film is still obviously fascism versus anarchism. It is literally unavoidable based on the source material. But some aspects of that latter part do make sense given the nature of the medium. Comics are not as popular as movies. And of course that means that Alan Moore obviously had more freedom to tell the story he wanted in his comic than the people who adapted it into making the film, who need to focus on bringing people from every aspect of life, which is very common for comic book movies to do. As such, leading to Moore being very explicit in what his intentions were, and the ways he did so were actually very interesting as well. Despite the fact that Moore very obviously agrees with V as opposed to Northfire, he sought to give the audience the ability to see something different. He made V very morally ambiguous, so you're left wondering, is this guy insane, or is this guy kinda spittin'? And even if you think his idea and his cause is ultimately good, you can go, well, but this guy's kind of a jerk, while also deciding to depict the people who are in the Northfire government as human beings and not mustache-twirling bad guys that most fascists are depicted as in a lot of these mediums. The film decides to go very much in that line, making it very on the nose that the bad guys are bad and evil, even changing the name from the Chancellor from Adam Susan to Adam Sutler so they can sneak in a Hitler reference, and having him appear on a massive screen to add an Orwell reference. Again, hammering in the point, Northfire is the bad guys. And while I can understand the criticisms on that front, allow me to play devil's advocate by stating people are f***ing stupid and need this spelled out for them because media literacy is dead. We have products that will have a very obvious message explained in a slightly subtle manner, and people will walk away with something vastly different from the artist's intentions. Huang Dongyao literally wrote Squid Game to be a denouncement of capitalism, with him explicitly saying, this is the intention that I am putting into this product. And then people walk away going, actually, this is an anti-communist show, and it loves capitalism. The Star Wars fandom had so many people defending the Empire that Disney had to get more explicit in showing that the Empire is fascist. And it wasn't even that subtle before they did this. Even with the babying, we still have people misinterpreting V. So I can see why Moore simply just wants them to go, dude, just get explicit, just get extremely explicit with this. There is no reason to dumb it down. At least with the original comic, there is absolutely zero way you can interpret V as anything less than an anarchist. However, all the contrasts that I stated previously pale in comparison to the one massive contrast, the thing that truthfully shows the difference between both of these interpretations. And it's all in the first letter of the title, V. On a surface level basis, there doesn't seem to be any difference between the two, not only in appearance, but also in the message that they're both trying to claim. Something hammered in both of these products is this: V is not a man, he is an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. But the thing is, I think only one of these two is truthful in that intention. In the comic, V is completely consumed by the cause and will do anything to accomplish his goals, kill those who oppose him, and even tortures Evie until she is radicalized to literally becoming V. Aside from knowing the fact that he used to be a concentration camp prisoner, we know nothing about him. We know about his ideas, we know about his beliefs, but we don't know anything about V, or rather the man V used to be, because that man does not exist. He is truly an idea. However, despite the fact the film claims that they are doing the same thing, they actually let you know what they're doing in the movie in the first scene. I wish I could play it, but that would definitely be copyright infringement, so here is a recreation of it using the text-to-speech.
Remember, the 5th of November. The gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. But what of the man? I know his name was Guy Fawkes, and I know in 1605, he attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. But who was he really? What was he like? We are told to remember the idea and not the man, because a man can fail. He can be caught, he can be killed and forgotten. But 400 years later, an idea can still change the world. I have witnessed firsthand the power of ideas. I've seen people kill in the name of them, and die defending them. But you cannot kiss an idea, cannot touch it or hold it. Ideas do not bleed. They do not feel pain. They do not love. And it is not an idea that I miss. It is a man. A man that made me remember the 5th of November. A man that I will never forget.
With the ensuing movie doing a lot to humanize V, we see him make food for Evie, having to explain his favorite films and music, showing remorse for the killings that he does, even reveal that he is in love with her. He is still the persona of V, but emphasis on the person part of the word. To the point where upon my first viewing, the one where I had not read the novel prior or knew anything about the characters, I thought that it was going to be revealed that V was Evie's dad, considering they mention that Evie's dad used to be an activist who was arrested for dissent. Where else would they put political dissidents in a fascist society? Like, again, the film kind of tries to make it seem like, oh no, he's just an idea. He's not a man. Even bringing up, oh, V doesn't even remember who he used to be. Whereas I don't remember that being a thing in the comic. I think literally V just shed whoever he used to be to become the persona. Again, showing he is an idea, not a man. Which, again, is shown better in the comic because when V dies, the identity gets adopted by Evie. The only thing that could be slightly considered similar in that regard is at the end of the movie where a bunch of people start wearing Guy Fawkes masks, but this can also just be interpreted as them honoring V the man. A similar thing can be said about the Che Guevara shirt. Some wear it to honor the idea of the man, some wear it to honor the man himself. V's relationship with Evie also shows this. In the comics, he does not love her at all. Like, not really at all, remotely. He loves the idea of her. The idea of a person he can radicalize and turn into his successor to continue the cause when he is gone. He does not see Evie the person. Whereas the film seems to imply that he is like the comic version until he meets Evie. She makes him rediscover his humanity. She still represents the future, but not necessarily as the next V. But rather, V dies with this society, and then Evie builds the next one. And ultimately, I think it is that really identifies the difference between the two. And I should clarify, neither version is incorrect, neither version is bad. I think genuinely both versions are good, and it would be beneficial to watch and read both of them so that you can get an understanding. And I highly recommend watching and reading both of them, especially if you're a person who is in the search of left-wing superheroes. And you know what? Now that I have a more broader appreciation of Alan Moore as a writer, I'm gonna try looking into his other works. I heard there's this other work that he made that has some form of politics. Maybe I can make an episode about that. I'm sure it won't take that much time to look into it. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to find out a future video when mine comes out. And if you want more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.